Victor Purton here on behalf of the Australian Leadership Project. Ted Purton and I caught up with Michelle Gallaher at the CSIRO Data 61 Data Innovation event, in which Michelle was the passionate compere and moderator. We asked her to talk to us about Australian leadership.
Michelle, what are your favourite stories of Australian leadership?
I think my favourite stories of Australian leadership really centre around the idea of stamina and persistence. It's that idea of, like a dog with a bone, that you just won't let it go, that you just keep going and going. There was a great comment today at Data 61 Live of the idea of continuing to persist and persist, because genius comes with failure. So we need to, if we're going to embrace genius, we have to embrace the idea of failure, and we're only going to learn from that experience. I think that's something that Australians really have to get a better grasp on.
And what are the examples? Who are the people who've really made a difference in your life, or you've seen, successful as leaders in Australia?
I think the leadership that I most admire in Australia is, if you like, it comes to a funny old saying around BHP, but that quiet achiever, somebody who sits in the background. And there was a tremendous man that was the chief executive of the Australian Stem Cell Centre for a while, Dr. Hugh Nile, and he'd spent many years overseas at Genentech, and he came back to Australia, and I used to call him Australia's best kept secret, because he kind of was, and he didn't necessarily have that showmanship kind of personality, but at the heart of it, directly, when he spoke to you, when he asked you to walk with him, there's just no way you could refuse. When I look back over his career, and I guess, he's now in his late 70s or early 80s, there's probably no one that shaped me as a leader more than Hugh. He used to have this beautiful thing, we'd sit together, and I used to call him the king of silence, and he would sit there and say, "Michelle, is there something else you'd like to talk about? Is there anything else that you'd like to tell me?" And I'd sit there resolute, going, I'm not, that's it, I'm not doing all the talking. And then eventually you'd go, "Yes, actually there was just this one more thing." And he would be so enthusiastic to be able to hear you out, and then he'd often give you permission and a huge pat on the back to go away, think about it, talk about it, collaborate, do it. But when I reflect back, the intensity of those meetings that we had, and the way I walked away feeling like, I had high heels that were 6 foot tall, and my chest was out, and my, shoulders were back, and that feeling when you can give somebody that as a leader, that's so what I want as a leader. That's how I want to make other people feel.
And what do you see as the unique qualities of Australian leadership or leaders? You've travelled a lot around the world, you've been able to compare. What's different about the Australian leader?
I think the difference about an Australian leader, certainly the ones that I've come across in the biopharma space, is that sense of connection that they have. It's a really unusual quality, and one that I think has kept a lot of the leaders in the biotech industry in Australia at the forefront, because they keep talking, they keep sharing, the network works. So having that cluster effect and that connectivity invested in all of the time, I think that's what gives the leaders in Australia that unique quality. We're kind of at a crossroads now, because our population has grown so much that it's actually kind of hard to keep that local network feeling. I hope we find a way of keeping that, and maybe what we're doing today with Data 61, looking at data and networks, maybe that's going to be the answer as to how we keep that very unique quality about Australians, how we embrace people into our circle, we make them feel welcome, and we're really willing to share. I think that's unique.
And thinking about all of the challenges and opportunities that were set out today at the Data 61, what do Australians want of their leaders?
I think Australians want something very specific from their leaders, and for me, I think it's actually empathy. That they need to have an understanding. Craig Laundy, who's the Assistant Minister for Innovation and Industry, actually said something today that really worked with me, and that he said this, that Australian companies, particularly SMEs, because of the company tax that we pay and the investment that we put into our whole ecosystem here in Australia, we need to make sure the government works for us. To me, that spoke empathy. He understood me as a small business owner, and he understood how hard it is to part with that hard-earned cash to put it back into the government coffers. Empathy is the thing that I think most leaders overlook, or they leave it to later, or they think that just charisma can do it. Anybody can understand the person that they're talking to and understand from their perspective what matters to them. Having leadership, particularly in government for me, is making sure my elected representatives understand my objective, understand what it means to me to be a small business owner. I think what I want to see more of is that depth and that greater perspective and understanding, and really see skills developed in our leadership around empathy. If you don't have this, I don't think you can actually bring meaning to any of the organisations that some of these leaders represent.
Super. Thank you for that.
And that's a big thank you to Michelle Gallaher and to Ted Purton, who did the camera work. If you'd like to read more stories of Australian leadership or share some stories of your own, please come to our website www.australianleadership.com. Have a great day.